Hey guys, my name is Shai, and this video is for souls who come from outside of this universe. And by this universe, I mean the whole shebang, like outside of this multiverse, outside of this consensus reality, outside of all of it. This harkens back for me to right in the beginning of my spiritual awakening, when I was really getting into starseed stuff and all of that, and I was actually seeking my starseed origin, because I had still back then had a really linear way of thinking, and I wanted to know, like, where was the first place I incarnated. And the message that I heard literally out loud whispered in my ear was, you come from outside. You come from outside. It was essentially my guides trying to get me to skip over all of the starseed stuff, the kind of 12D scaffolding type of experience, and cut straight to the chase, right? You come from outside. I understood, I knew what they meant. I knew that they meant you come from outside of this entire thing, right? You come from outside of this egg. And I mean, I've talked about this before in other videos. It comes up every once in a while. I know in some pick a card readings, I've definitely talked about it. And every once in a while, I do a private reading where this really comes through for someone. But this is apparently the time for me to focus on one whole video specifically about this. And so for some of you, this is going to be old news. You're like, yeah, I know. I'm from outside of this universe. Like, you totally know that, and you're just like good with that. Some of you, maybe you've been kind of wondering, feeling into it, but you haven't quite had it click. I mean, well, so now is when it's going to click for you. And then there's like a third group of people who maybe you feel this like draw. You almost feel like maybe you want to be from outside of this universe. You want to like have that as part of your identity, but you almost feel like you can't quite take that on, because who are you to claim that for yourself, right? And almost feeling like, but you're so small, but you're just little old you, right? How could you possibly be this, grandiose being who's from outside of this universe? And for you guys, I would say consider how hierarchical thinking or the comparison trap might actually be holding you back here. Because if you feel like you're too small to be so cool as to be from outside of this universe, think about what that thought is actually, like what that thought actually is, right? That is a sign of, first of all, comparing yourselves to others, and a huge sign of hierarchical or vertical linear thinking. And it kind of has this assumption that some soul origins are better than others, and that being from outside of this particular universe is somehow better than, bigger than, more impressive than, more grandiose than being from inside of this particular universe. That is, of course, not the case, because how could one soul origin be better than another soul origin, right? That's like saying that being from, I don't know, Lethbridge, Alberta is better or worse than being from Paris, right? It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter, right? It's neutral, right? It's a neutral thing. It's just part of who you are. So if you feel like this idea of, you're too small to have this identity, think about how that's actually a limitation of a hierarchical and comparison-based thought system. And once you truly understand that where you come from is just a neutral thing, it just is what it is, then that's when you actually open yourself up to actually remember who you are fully and completely, because then it's not better or worse. It just is what it is, and that's it, right? So, this has recently kind of come back around for me, because my guides have started using a new word. They have been calling souls who come from outside of this universe, at least the kind that are kind of like me, right? Like me and people like me, people who would resonate with this video, right? Because the really important thing here is that when I'm talking about souls that come from outside of this universe, that it's really hard to actually do a general reading for this group, because every single being would be so individual, so unique. You could have be coming from entirely different like vibrations, experiences, realities, concepts, primordial soup. Like it can be so entirely different, right? So this video will have to necessarily be rather vague because trying to find the common threads here, there really aren't that many, right? There really aren't that many. So anyway, so my guides have been using this word to kind of label us. They're calling us phantoms. Phantoms. And I thought that was super strange. And I was kind of like, what do you mean, guys? Because typically the word phantom, right? We use that to, sometimes that word can actually be considered like negative, right? Can be considered something that's not real, or maybe something like a ghost. And the way the word gets used in pop culture, it's just, I was like, what a weird word to pick, right? And I was like, how are we phantoms? How are we phantoms? Why are you using this word? So I'm actually here to unpack that a little bit, but what I'm kind of getting a little bit of two things on this. One, part of the reason they picked that word, and again, you don't have to use this word. It's not like this word phantom has to be a big deal. It's just something that my guides are using. One of the reasons they're using that word is that we're not really here. I mean, we are here. We are totally here, but we're not really here fully, completely in the way that you might think being here means. Because what they're kind of showing me is that, the outsider self, that's the phrase I'm going to use to refer to the aspect of yourself that came from outside of this universe and is actually, in fact, still there, right? Because that's the thing. You never actually left, and that's why they're using this word phantom. It's like we made copies of ourselves, lots of them, many of them, actually. Well, I mean, that's going to vary. Maybe some of you only made one copy, and maybe some of us made lots of copies. This is what I'm going to say. Like, you're really going to have to feel through here, because this particular group of people who are going to resonate with this, it's going to be so individuated that the generalities are very hard to find. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of filtering through what I'm saying. So we made copies of ourselves, little copies, and kind of sent the little copies into this universe, kind of like injecting the ghost into the machine here. Almost like planting a seed, but the seed analogy, even though it works, it doesn't feel like the best match for this. More, it feels like we kind of made copies of our spirit, almost like making ghosts of ourselves. I think that's why this word phantom is coming through, right? We made little phantoms of ourselves and like injected them into this multiverse to go off and have experiences. And in that way, we're not, so the word phantom, right? It's partly because of this, like we've copied ourselves and sent little phantoms of ourselves into this universe. And because of that, that's why there's this feeling of not quite being here, not really in the way, because the bigger part of yourself isn't here, right? The bigger part of yourself is outside. And it's the feeling of being on the other side of the bulkhead almost. It's a different feeling than the veil, right? I've gone through so many experiences of the veil is thinning, and then the veil is gone. And I have experiences of like the veil being completely gone. This is almost like a different level of the veil. It's almost like the walls of the universe, the boundaries of the universe. And the word I want to use is the bulkhead, the bulk, like almost like the final membrane, the eggshell. The bigger part of yourself is on the other side of that. And something here about being untethered, okay? I'm sure most of you are familiar with the concept of like the silver cord, right? The silver cord that, connects us to our source, right? So there's that, but that's a concept that applies to how things are inside of this universe. When you come from outside of this universe, at least for the group of people I'm tuning into here, we're untethered, or there's not actually like a cord or a connection to the outsider self. And this is tough because I don't believe that you can ever really be lost or that you can ever really be severed from yourself. Not really, right? You can have many experiences of being lost, of being severed, of being disconnected, but at the end of the day, you're not really, 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 you can never really lose yourself, right? But there is this feeling here of being untethered. There's no direct, like, umbilical cord taking you back. And that was necessary, right? It's because you made a phantom of yourself and like injected yourself into this universe, and you kind of like your phantoms like went off free roaming, right? And there was no direct line back. There was no direct path back. But you did this because you knew without a shadow of a doubt, because you knew who you are, right? You knew that you would always find your way back, and you knew that that is part of your nature. That is who you are. Even though the journey might be inconceivably chaotic and long and unpredictable and have all kinds of who knows what might go wrong, right? You knew that in the end you would always come back to yourself, because that is how it is. That is how it works. That is who you are. That is your nature. All of your parts would ultimately come back to yourself. All of your phantoms that went out into this universe and evolved and grew and changed, and maybe some of them even became almost unrecognizable in the way that they have grown and evolved and changed. But you knew that you would always recognize yourself, and you would always, in the end, ultimately, at the end of the inconceivable journey, all of your pieces would ultimately come back to yourself. And then when you reintegrate yourself with all of your phantoms that have grown up and become something new, you would become exponentially more than you ever had been before. And at the end of the day, I think that is the reason that we did this, right? We all have our own personal, unique reasons for doing this. Could be, building the universe, contributing to building the universe. It could be to assist or to serve or to help other souls. It could be because of a particular soul that you came in here because you followed them out of love, right? Love is really the bottom of the reason to do this. But there's also reasons of just exponential self-expansion, right? Exponential self-expansion. So, yeah, even though you might be untethered in an unknown universe, it is your nature to really rock that, right? It's like you don't need the tether. You don't need the rope. You don't need to be able to see the path back, because you're not navigating in that linear way. You don't need the tether. You don't need the path back, because you recognize what is for you to do or to be or to become or to interact with. You recognize everything vibrationally, right? That is, in fact, how you recognize other pieces of yourself, your other phantoms, because you recognize, like, the vibration of your own self recognizes the vibration of your own self, even if by all appearances you have changed beyond recognition. The vibration of self is still there. It's almost like a smell. It's almost like a smell. You know how dogs can, a dog might not see you for a really long time and you might completely change your appearance, but the dog will recognize you because of your smell, right? And maybe sometimes you've had an experience where there's something you haven't smelled since you were a small child and you've completely forgotten all about it. But then you walk into a room one day and you smell that, and then all of these memories come flooding back. It's like that, right? It's this vibrational recognition, and that is how you know. That is how you know. The violet flame. So this message of transmutation. This message of transmutation. I'm laughing because, of course, this is the message that comes up because I've been thinking about this a ton lately. A ton. An absolute ton. You came into this universe with a extraordinary capacity to transmute energies internally. And you do this by absorbing all kinds of energy. This is ancestral energy. This is your... Okay, so most of you tuning into this are starseeds, and you resonate with a lot of my starseed videos and all of that, and so it's your starseed heritage. But I'm getting that there are going to be at least a couple of people watching this who aren't starseeds, who came into this universe, came directly to Earth, and so there's that. So I don't know, just hello to you guys, right? So it's, your human ancestry, your intergalactic ancestry for most of you, but not for some of you. The emotions of others, the emotions of where you live. Some of you, if you live in a physical location on Earth where there has been a lot of physical conflict, a lot of warfare over many centuries or even many millennia, all of this different energy you're picking up on, and even energies that are essentially that have been rolling around this universe since this universe was created. So I get this a lot, that when the universe was created, when the universe came into being, right? When it came into being, when this universe originally started to exist, there was like side effect energy, like leftover energy. I'm trying to, there's like an example here, but I don't remember the details. So, I'm probably going to get this a little wrong, but the example will work. I think like Vaseline, like petroleum jelly, isn't that like a leftover substance that you get when you're refining, like when you're making plastic? Something like that. So it's like the universe was born or created or came into being, whatever. And there was a side effect to that. There was some leftover energy. And it's kind of like, it has its uses. It can be used for certain things, but it's also an energy that is really hard to break down and has just been kind of existing for eons and eons and eons, for however old this universe is, right? It's this leftover energy, like the leftover from the birth of this universe, and that energy still has yet to be broken down. So it's that as well. So there's all these different levels of what you're transmuting, and you take that into yourself, and you have an extraordinary capacity to do internal transmutation. And why is it so important to that we do this, right? Why is it so important that we absorb this energy and that we transmute it internally? It's because internal processing of energy, and this is in the terms of the thoughts and feelings, and that can manifest as, intense thoughts and feelings, mental health challenges, physical challenges in your body, right? Health challenges, any way that you can process these things internally, and also just like overcoming big hurdles in your life, right? All of this internal processing is so important, because that's working the violet flame on the inside and transmuting all of this energy on the inside so that it doesn't have to manifest externally. And this is where you really need to understand how significant it is, like all of your internal, whatever it is, right? Whatever's going on inside of you, whatever that is for you. Yes, sometimes it's very challenging, right? To say the least. But that is so significant, because every time you work through this energy and you transmute it internally, it spares the entire universe from having to manifest that externally, right? So you might go through a big, long internal process of trying to overcome or process or release some emotions or some thoughts or a physical challenge in your body or a mental health struggle, right? All of these things. You chose that internal challenge because otherwise all of that energy would go outside and it would manifest as external conflict, like conflicts with other people, perhaps challenges with resources, perhaps literally things going wrong physically in the earth. even manifesting as like violence of other people. It's like it would ripple out into the world and manifest externally. And it can manifest also as like what you might consider to be external karma, right? Things manifesting outside of you. You're doing this inside, this internal processing, this internal transmutation of all kinds of old, stuck energies, right? And very interesting. So, what gives you this capacity? And it's actually because it's almost like you're connected to a supercomputer. You know, like your outsider self is sort of like a supercomputer with astronomical processing power, right? Because it's not limited by the restraints of this universe, especially by our 3D reality. It's not limited by any of that. So it can process enormous amounts of energy. So the fact that you're down here, that you're in here, right? The fact that you're in here, taking these energies inside of yourself, taking them inside of yourself for transmutation, even though maybe it has often felt that you're doing it all alone, you're actually transmuting an amount of energy that you will never really fully understand. Like your human mind on a mental level, you'll never really fully understand this until you leave your body. And that because, you know, after you leave your body and you go through your flashback, right, you will see, that is when you will see how much of an impact your presence has made, right? And how much energy you've transmuted. And it's because you're actually handing over a lot of this energy to your outsider self, right? To your supercomputer self. And your outsider self, your supercomputer self, wouldn't be able to assist in this processing, in the transmutation of all of this energy if you weren't in here, right? If you weren't in here, and if you weren't here in a human body, if you weren't inside of this universe in some capacity. And now they're showing me there are a lot, there are more of these like phantoms, right? More of our beings like this, more of these outsider beings that simply, they came into this universe, and a lot of them are here, but they're not in a human body. And a lot of them have never incarnated in any type of 3D body. A lot of them are kind of came down and kind of stopped at what I could call like the 5D level of consciousness. Those of us who actually came down into physical bodies and then ultimately even came down into bodies on Earth. This is like, I don't know, it's like the equivalent of like climbing Everest, right? How many people climb Everest and get to the top of Everest? And they're like, okay, it's not even that. How many people climb Everest over and over and over and over again? How many people climb Everest like thousands of times? It's like, that's a little bit of an analogy, right? But we would actually need a mountain a lot higher than Everest. It's kind of like that. So yeah. Some cards. Let's get more cards. The Devil. I just noticed there's like a cat hair here. The Devil of the World. That was the Six of Swords. I shuffled it back in. I'll see if it comes back out. So a little bit of a transition here. Four of Cups. Interesting. The Tower and Temperance. I'll take it. So, guys, very interesting. 4 major arcana, and they're not just like any major arcana, okay? They're like the big impact major arcanas, right? Temperance, the devil, the tower, the world, and it's coming out here with the Four of Cups. So this devil card, those of you who are watching this who have Capricorn placements, right? You don't have to be a Capricorn sun. Just check out your Capricorn energy. This also includes like 10th house placements. You can also look at anything going on with Saturn, either in your birth chart or in your transit chart. This is, Saturnian energy coming up here. Why did you take on so much, right? Why did you take on so much? There was, it's literally like, did you take on like the whole world, right? Did you take on the whole world? Sometimes it might feel that way, but there is a deeper level of purpose to what you took on than maybe you have understood at this point. So everything that you know about why you took on so much, yes, all of that is true and important and significant, but there's deeper levels here. It's kind of like, there is a deeper purpose here. Like you have a deeper reason, right? And it's like you trying to remember your reason for doing this, and understanding that reason is going to go hand in hand with the next level of your experience of consciousness. It's a leveling up, almost like in order to level up to this next level of consciousness, excuse the linear hierarchical language. It's just hard sometimes to stay away from that. But in order to get to this next level, you have to remember why you did this, but also you can't really remember why you did this on this next level without getting to the next level. It's like that goes hand in hand. So, just a little example here. This isn't, the whole truth for everyone. This is just a little bit of an example to show you what I mean. Maybe you had this idea of, you came here to be of service to others. You volunteered to come here to be of service to others. That's a really common like starseed idea, right? Especially the Dolores Cannon. She did all of that work talking about the volunteers, right? The starseed volunteers, all that kind of stuff. So that's a really common idea that rolls around, and it is a real thing, but there's so much more to it than that, and that's kind of what you're going to be feeling into. So yes, on one level, you came here to be of service, and then maybe you went through a whole process of understanding, okay, well, I'm not just here to be of service. I'm also here to live and to thrive and to live a wonderful life for my own sake, right? It's not all about serving others all of the time. And sometimes, most of the time, maybe I can be of deeper levels of service by living my best life, right? I don't help others by sacrificing myself. I help others by thriving, right? So maybe that's, levels you've gone through. And then what about the next level, this higher level of this? Maybe it's, wow, okay, as I learn to thrive and as I learn to overcome all of my challenges, then I become an example and an inspiration for others, right? Especially those of you who have the quote unquote master numbers in your numerology chart. And it doesn't have to just be your life path number, right? You can check out your whole chart, your whole numerology chart. If you've got like 11, 22, or 33, or if you have those numbers rolling around for you in other ways, that's just, you don't need to have those obviously to resonate with this, but that's a sign of like where that might be playing out for you, right? Being an example to others, being an inspiration to others, and then really helping all of those people that you interact with, right? All the people that you connect with, your energy actually providing them with the nourishment that they need in order to then go off and do their own deeper levels of transmutation, right? Like it's like creating the ripple effect, right? Creating the ripple effect here. What if you're here to create this ripple effect? There's always a next level, right? There's always a deeper purpose. What's next? What's the next level of why you are here? What does that next level feel like for you? Again, it's going to be very unique and individual for everyone, right? And it might come as a bit of a shock. This Tower card, because this reading is so abstract, I don't really see this Tower card. I'm not feeling it at all like a, something is going to happen in your life and it's going to, be shocking. I'm not feeling it like that at all. This is like a spiritual epiphany, right? Like something that shocks your consciousness into the next level, but it can happen just through your own internal process, right? It doesn't, that's the thing about this violet flame energy, is when you are processing all of this energy internally, you don't need the tower moment to rocket you into your next reality, right? You can process all of this internally just by doing your own inner work and walking your spiritual path. And you can have massive epiphanies and big leveling up and all of this stuff without anything actually happening, right? And that's, the more you work the violet flame, the more you do your inner alchemy, the more you do all of this internally, the less tower moments actually manifest in your life. And this comes from, deeper and deeper states of emotional balance. And, I keep finding myself, I go longer and longer and longer in my life with these longer periods of peace and tranquility and equanimity, and I just flow and I exist in this nice state, and I feel like, oh, nothing will ever rattle me again, and that might go for like a whole year, right? And then I'll go through like a period of like a month or something where I'm totally rattled and I feel like I get completely derailed and I'm like an emotional mess and I feel like, oh, I've backslid, right? It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And then once I get through that phase of, getting triggered and getting rattled, and I realize, wow, I was actually just purging another level of stuff, right? I was just purging a deeper level of stuff. And then once I get through that purge process, then I'm like, okay, well, guess what? Now I learned that I don't need to be triggered by that stuff anymore. I don't need to be triggered by it anymore. I don't need to have extreme emotional responses to that trigger anymore. And it's funny how things often get a little bit worse, but then they get way better, right? It's almost like you get really triggered by a thing, and then you get frustrated with yourself for going, why didn't I handle that better? Why didn't I handle that with, courage and grace and equanimity? And why didn't I respond with compassion? Why didn't I respond from my heart, right? But then once you get through that little mess, then you're like, oh, well, now I can, right? Now I can. Now I can. Now next time I'm not going to fall off the wagon, the emotional wagon for when that thing happens again next time, right? So you could have like an emotional disturbance. And really, I feel like most of you, maybe this emotional disturbance or this emotional upheaval has recently been happening for you. And it was just clearing the way for a deeper level of emotional equanimity. And, then next time that things happen in life, you're just going to be like, whatever, I'm just going to roll with the punches. I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to trust in the divine. Deeper levels of trust, deeper levels of faith, deeper levels of emotional equanimity, and deeper capacity. Honestly, what it is upgrading your inner capacity for even more profound levels of internal alchemy. Like the violet flame, like growing and growing and growing inside of you, like a furnace that just incinerates and transforms more and more and more and more and more of this energy, and doing it like it's becoming more and more and more and more effortless, right? More and more and more and more effortless. This constant expansion. It's almost like you're a furnace of the violet flame that is constantly being upgraded, constantly being improved, right? Constantly being more and more and more able to effortlessly transmute whatever it is that you're taking on to be transmuted. And the interesting thing with this 4 of Cups over here, to be coming out with all of this stuff, I kind of see this, like I can feel this. I can feel this energy, because that's kind of how I'm feeling this today, actually. The 4 of Cups gets a little bit of a bad rap. It can be, like ennui, that special type of French boredom. It can just be feeling like a sulky teenager in its lower frequencies, right? But also, sometimes I think, okay, well, what would the higher frequency of the 4 of Cups be? It would actually be emotional stability, because 4 is that number of stability, Cups being emotions, 4 being this emotional stability. And yeah, that can be a little bit boring. It can feel a little bit numb. You might feel a little bit empty. It can be feeling a little bit tired. Do you know that feeling when you've cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and freaked out and cried and melted down, and then eventually you come to this place of just like, you're so done? So imagine that feeling, but without all that negative stuff attached to it. Maybe just feeling the highest frequency of this would actually be feeling perfectly at peace, right? Perfectly at peace. I don't know about you, but I'm not feeling I don't know if the feeling I'm feeling right now is peaceful. I don't know if that's really the right word. It's just this feeling of kind of, I'm not really feeling much at all. It's a little bit of a feeling of being hollowed out. It's not a bad feeling. It's not a particularly good feeling either, right? You know how peace feels really good. Numbness feels typically kind of bad, even though you're not really feeling much at all. This is something in between. I don't really know the word for it. Maybe you have a word. Hollowed out, but not in a bad way. It's this kind of emotional neutrality. It's this kind of emotional neutrality, this neutral point, this emotional neutral point that is actually quite stable. So, interesting. You might stay in that type of vibe for a while, right? You might stay, it could be a couple of hours, it could be a couple of days, it could be a few months. It depends on your journey, right? Depends on your journey, but they're showing me of, sometimes you have to clean a cupboard out. What do you do to clean out a cupboard? You have to empty the cupboard before you put everything back in, and you have to wipe it all out and stuff. So there's this little bit of a feeling of emotional emptying. And it's just part of this cleansing process, just part of this cleansing process. And simply be in this neutral space for as long as you are in it. Deep, deep, deep purpose here. There's deep purpose here. Little side note message for a few of you, not for all of you, but if you're in a kind of, if you're in between jobs or something, or in between relationships, and a part of you is kind of feeling like you got to get a job, or you should be dating, you want to find your partner, that kind of stuff. If this is manifesting as a kind of external in-between place, really the invitation here is to just, instead of trying to get out of the void space, just settle into it for now. It's a little bit like winter, okay? It's a little bit like winter. In the middle of winter, if you're in a place that has winter, is there any point in trying to force the planet to make spring come faster? That would be a waste of your energy, wouldn't it? Because sometimes the seasons simply need to turn and change themselves. So the best thing you can do in the winter is just kind of get under a blanket, snuggle up, make yourself as cozy as you can, and find whatever is pleasant to kill time, right? If winter is not your favorite season, you might be waiting all winter for spring to come, for the sun to come out, for the flowers to bloom, for the warmth of the sunlight to return. But if you live in the winter, you just got to wait it out. Sometimes, right? Sometimes these energies simply need their own, it's just a seasonal thing, right? So don't pressure yourself to, that's the thing. Try to consider this neutral point that you're in. Try to consider it like a season. It is literally a space that you are in. It's not you. So trying to force yourself to start acting like it's springtime when it's not. Like you wouldn't go out in your garden in the middle of January unless you had some kind of, I don't know if there are plants that you plant in January. You know what I mean, right? You wouldn't go out in January if you're in the northern hemisphere, right? If you're in the winter in January, you wouldn't go out and act like it's springtime, right? You would just be in the wintertime. So if that's where you're at, then that's where you're at. Oh, and they're like, okay, so for those of us who are from outside of this universe, that concept right there, you are where you are, and you kind of sometimes just have to accept that your environment is the way it is. That's actually a foreign idea, because where you are from, you manifest your environment as a reflection of yourself. And that is, of course, true. We do that here. But it's not like a one-to-one instant thing. Not right now, not in the experience that we are having right now, right? We influence our environment. Our 3D reality is a reflection of who we are and all of that, but it's not the way it is where you come from, right? Because there are so many other beings and energies and factors at play here, right? This is a consensus reality. This is a multiplayer game. So other people are influencing what's going on. It's not like where you come from, where you and your environment are one and the same, where you literally create down to every detail, and like your environment is you. Your environment is essentially made of your own energy. You know, right now here on Earth, that's working a little differently. So that's actually part of your learning here, is learning to get along with an external reality that you can't control, right? That you can influence and that is a reflection of you. And figuring the nuances of this out is part of what you're doing, right? Figuring the nuances of to what extent is your reality a reflection, and how can you see better reflections in your environment, right? And how are you impacting your environment and creating ripples by doing all of your internal processing? You're figuring out all of these nuances. But it's just not exactly the same as as how it is where you come from, and that is still like a frustrating thing for you. So having to wait out a winter, or having to wait out a kind of neutral void space type of energy might be annoying, right? Ooh, forgiveness. And we have this sunset, and here you are reaching up to this crescent moon. Very interesting. Let me read this message. The sunset glow. As the sun sinks behind the horizon and the reds and oranges turn to the lavenders and deep purples of the ensuing night, the day is complete. Sunset signifies that a new cycle has begun. As each star emerges into the velvet sky, we enter a realm of the dark unknown, where magic and even the mystery of life itself seems to shimmer above us all. To be regretting that the day is done is to miss the glory of the starry heavens above. The sacred landscape wants you to know. It is human to want to hold on to the past, our memories, experiences, and relationships. However, there can be times when we are carrying so much of the past that we can't fully see the present. The past doesn't need to equal the future. Wow, that is a powerful message, guys. The past doesn't need to equal the future. Just because you had a pattern or a recurring challenge in the past doesn't mean that it needs to recur in the future. The key is to be willing and ready to simply and cleanly let go of the hold that the past has on you. The past is gone, and it is okay to let it go. The way to do this is to fully immerse yourself in the here and now. Be super aware of the sights, sounds, smells, textures, and the energy of the present. When you do this, the past simply vanishes and the glory of the present emerges. That is a beautiful, perfect message to end on, so I'm going to leave you guys there. Sending you so much love and light. Talk to you later. Bye.